Well, hello everybody. How are we living?
Jeremy, what's up, brother?
How are we doing here? I'm trying to get my headphones to get their sync on. Looks like we have they didn't have their morning coffee, so it's not happening.
My man, I like the haircut, by the way.
All right.
Appreciate it. We're
You're
finally not
the link.
we're not a cave person anymore. Man.
I'm tweeting out the link and I'll tag you guys so it's easy to find.
All right, I'll retweet it. It's just the three of us, yeah?
Yes, just we were going to have, we're live now, by the way.
Cool.
We're going to have JB Rebner, who is a writer, reporter, and mixed martial arts and boxing in Montreal, but his day got crazy. He's also a mental coach. I find fascinating.
I could probably use some of that.
Oh my God, we all, right, at this time? Okay, so let me just get, all right.
There we go. All righty.
Appreciated it. Now I'm back. Hello. Good to see you. All right.
All right, I'm going to retweet this real quick.
Oh yes, please do.
So where can we see the stream and like the other people? And
actually, this is a seminar with just you wonderful gentlemen, because I was going to have a couple other people on, but it just timing didn't work out. And I also want to note that my co-professor, Tanisha Singleton, is on the road. She wanted to be here. She's out of Fielding Graduate University and teaches, she's a professor of media psychology. She is moving now because they're online. She has decided to move to the fight capital of the world, Las Vegas.
Wow.
Right? I mean, why not? These are the things I think, this is the title of this seminar. It's innovation, communication, and martial arts. And I think that that's something we really need to be thinking about, especially during COVID, where our lives have changed. Charles was just showing me his makeshift room now, created to communicate. You know, because you have multiple jobs, and I'll get to you because you're also a podcast host as well as Jeremy. And this is what we're doing. And especially, I've had a lot of people who reached out to me when I told them that I was having you on, because what is it really like to be a gym owner during COVID? And take us through if you could take us back there, it seems like a million years ago, Charles, and go through where you are now. That would be really fascinating. So, all right, let's get this started. It is June 11th, 2020. And I am joined for this Innovation Communication Martial Arts Seminar by Charles Ziscu. And we're old friends. And I think that you've been on my class pre-virtual. I think that was 7 or 8 times. And then a few virtual visits. You were also part of the AU, American University MMA Symposium, which took place last December in person. I can't even imagine that we did that before the UFC card in DC. And that was so great. We got a lot of insight. And it's interesting because we're seeing all of the themes that we talked about, like what the journalist's role is in terms of how that's going to work. Commentary has had to be shifted. So I'm glad that we started those conversations then, because who knew how valuable. So Charles is also near and dear to my heart because he's a 2014 alumnus from American University. Go Eagles. Charles has participated in the mixed martial arts world in a multitude of ways. He's had work for several promotions, including Combate Americas, Cagezilla, and is currently the play-by-play commentator for Donald Cerrone, the Cowboy Fight Series, a local DC amateur MMA promotion. Love to see that to get going soon, hopefully. Along with all of this, he's a senior consultant at Lynch Consulting. And along with all of that, he hosts a podcast, Lover and the Fighter, right?
That's right.
Right. And along with all that, he's a co-owner of District Martial Arts, an MMA gym in Arlington, Virginia. Thank you, Charles.
Thanks for having me.
Thank you. You know what? I am going to put this, I'm going to keep it in gallery for now, but then I'll switch it. Okay. So next we also have, thank you for joining us, Jeremy Francesi. And I have to do this quote. I found it on your LinkedIn. you were raised to ask, how are you, before asking, what do you do? You were obviously not raised in Washington, D.C.
No, ma'am, I was not.
And
No,
I
I was
love
not.
that. So you are a 2016 graduate of George Mason, and you are now a district manager, but you've been at ADP for 4 years, and a multitude of consulting, CPA work. I'll be honest, I'm in literature. I don't know what that means.
It's all. I'll explain. Yeah.
There we go.
Absolutely.
I read books and I talk about them. That's my, So also you last year started a podcast called First Floor Conversations. And by the end of 2020, you hope to have 80 episodes already. And the guiding principle is this: the view at the top is only as good as the foundation which preserves it. Which I think is really fascinating. And you interview professionals all across industries and backgrounds. I think I put my Twitter, like, just naming, I just saw that you had a broadcaster, a CEO, an MMA co-owner of a gym. You had a flight professor. So what I love is that you're unpacking stories to kind of learn. And it's a really, I recommend it to everyone. I recommend Lover and the Fighter for people who want to get inside Charles's head about MMA. And I recommend Jeremy's podcast because it's storytelling also with guidance and advice in business. So thank you guys for joining me.
Love it. Thanks for having us.
Thank you. All right, let's get into it. I mentioned this, Charles, this is kind of a top line thing that I've been hearing. We know small businesses, COVID has been so disruptive, decimating, we know, across all, I think, industries. But gym owner, and a gym owner who had just relocated, brand spanking opening, I believe, mid-February.
That's right, February 15th.
All right, take us.
Yeah, so I've owned district martial arts now for 2.5 years, and truly, actually, I talked about this with Jeremy on his podcast, which is incredibly informative in a variety of different ways. I've learned a lot just by listening in. So there's the free plug, brother. But I'm so happy with the community. Excuse me, guys. I'm sorry. I'm so happy with the community, and I'm so thrilled to be a part of it. And really, it's one of my most proudest achievements. So I say all that because after 2.5 years of operating in a place that was the equivalent of like a long hallway with a closet, and it was matted like an insane asylum, we were able to move to a beautiful first floor spot in Arlington, Virginia, right in Ballston. And, floor to ceiling windows, triple the space. It's wide open. It's nicer. It's great. It's great. And we moved in February 15th. And in the process of moving, I would say we ran into every hurdle that's ever existed, some self-imposed, some imposed. And then we had to close March 15th. So that was pretty tough. Obviously, we did that because of the pandemic, and that is still going on. So that's something that's affecting us still. Oddly enough, I was just on the phone with the guys before getting on this call. We were talking about how we can open in phase 2. And a lot of the phases that have been in Virginia, when you read them at face value, you're like, oh, that could work, right? Virginia's opening up. But the reality is that opening up is very relative. Now, I don't know how much it's enforced, but for example, in a gym, an indoor facility, the expectation is that you'll have 10 feet of space, social distancing, between each participant or each member, anybody who's exercising.
10 feet.
10 feet. So more than what's expected to be regulated. The 6 feet that we've been doing this entire time, they actually increased that in a gym environment. And in a contact sport, needless to say, that's not going to work. So we're navigating some of these challenges now, but I can tell you the financial toll of it all is pretty significant. For a new business, for any business, this has been a really tough time. For a new business, I think this has been especially difficult. And then for a new business that has relocated to a newer, more expensive location, I think it was the perfect storm of just bad luck, to put it one way. Now, for us right now, the debate is, how can we operate as a business and stay true to the community that we provide the service to, and really stay true to who we are, which is a martial arts facility, while simultaneously navigating I think there's some cultural and legal guidelines that we have to follow that might be more specific than the other, and it's just a really weird time to try to get back to a normal way of life, to put it bluntly.
Yeah. No, and I understand dues. Did you tell people you would postpone them, or did people volunteer? Because I know some people said, I want you guys to do okay. I'm donating my dues. How did you negotiate that?
Sure. So I'm actually really proud of that. Again, I keep talking about the community, but we have so many great people at our gym that continue to support us and actually said, hey, just for as long as it goes, you keep charging me. And that's really the difference between us going out of business and us staying in business. So yeah, their generosity and their loyalty has actually kept us alive. And I could tell you, because I'm in charge of all the finances, had they not been supporting us, we would be in dire straits. Well, actually, this month might have been the last month we would have been around anyway. So we really lucked out that we had those folks supporting us. But what we did, and I should tell you guys this, is when we closed, we actually froze all the accounts prematurely. So we told everybody flat out, hey, if we're not open, we're not going to charge you, and we're going to figure it out on our own. And that was my thought. Was I know we can do 2.5, 3 months. I'm sure this is only going to be a month-long thing. That's what we were thinking.
Didn't we all?
Yeah, you know what I mean? So the thought was, all right, my first priority is, I know these people are struggling. They don't need to know how hard we're struggling. Although now with the millions of fans on YouTube, they do now as well. But we were in this position. Yeah, right. We were in this position where I didn't want to continue to charge people out of necessity if I'm not offering something. So we all came to the agreement. We let everybody know that their memberships would be frozen. They're not going to have any payments, from, I think it was like the April 1st on until we're open. There's no expectation that you have to pay. In fact, if you need anything, let us know. We'd love to help you out in any way we can, because we really do have this community. And then we had a significant portion come back and say, hey, just keep going, take it. And that difference was that made the difference between us folding and staying open. And right now we are anticipated to open, and things are okay. Obviously not great, but it was the difference between losing thousands of dollars per month versus losing an entire business.
And I think I've seen a lot of people on Twitter saying that they were still getting to their gym, because it is that there is something special with the MMA community. I've seen it when you go to the smaller promotions like Cowboy sort of Fight Series or Kzilla, where you can tell it is the gym that is there. They have it's like going to like a European soccer team where they're like all in the same cheering. And so yeah, no, and I'm so happy to hear that. Now, did you do virtual? Because I know some places we're going to try and do some of that. Did that work out for you guys?
So we did a couple of instructional videos, and then we also did virtual. We are still doing virtual twice a week of boxing, strength and conditioning class. And then in addition to that, we also do a yoga class on Saturdays. So we still kept in with the community. We actually sent out daily emails. My partner, Scott Dance, he would write a workout every single day, Monday through Friday, and he would send it out. So he's been continuing to do that. And basically we've been doing everything we can to offer something. But again, those offerings are up for everybody. That's not just for the paying members. That's for anybody who's a part of the DMA community, because again, I think a lot of people are struggling right now. And, there was, without putting into the politics, there was a lot of government initiatives that got murky for one way or the other. And I know that some companies made out really well with the Paycheck Protection Program and the EIDL loans and everything like that. What I can tell you guys is that it was based off your 2019 taxes. So for 2019, all of our expenses reflected this big move. So without going into the details, obviously our expenses were elevated much more than they normally would have been. And our revenue, while it increased, proportionally, our revenue was much lower this past year than it was in 2018. And as such, the Paycheck Protection Program and all these other loan programs, they reflected that. So there's good for this, right? You don't want a company saying that they're a multi-million-dollar company, and the reality is they're selling, $10,000 worth of product a month. That's a big difference. But in our case, we got, I don't want to say the short end of the stick, but it was just, the perfect storm of bad timing, because not only did we lose so much liquid in the move, or really I shouldn't say lose, spend, on our books, it changed the way the business was framed. So had it happened 3 months later, we would have gotten like $30,000, which is a big difference than what we did get. Like a multiple of 10. So basically, these federal programs, I think they came from the right place, but like anything, when there's bureaucracy, I think somebody's going to get a little bit more than others, and somebody's going to be getting greased up maybe a little bit more. And unfortunately, DMA wasn't that. But I'm okay saying all that, because with the community that we've had and the support that we've had from our members, we're doing okay.
Yeah, no, and I'm glad. So we're in phase 1. You're in Arlington, Virginia.
Right.
And so Arlington County, is that where you're going based on all your restrictions and where you're moving? So phase 2, is that coming soon?
So phase 2 starts tomorrow. And for gyms that are allowed to open, we're taking a little bit of a cautious path, because one, even though the move was great, we moved to a super visible location. It's not somewhere you want to be if you're not following the rules closely. Yeah. So we're kind of trying to wait and see how the rules play out, what we can do, and have a foolproof plan where if somebody does say, hey, why is this gym open? I mean, basically I want to have all of our eggs, everything covered, so that if there is a complaint, we can prove and justify our existence, and that we're following the rule set, and that we're not doing anything wrong. Because right now you have a lot of people who are kind of blurring the lines and pushing the envelope. And I think if you have the money or the stomach to kind of fight this type of response head on, you'll be fine. But for a close contact gym that centers around fighting in an area that might not be that fond of fighting in general, I think we have to be a little bit more diplomatic in the way we approach and respect our community as well, not just the district martial arts community, but the community that we are located in.
I think that's a wise move. Okay, so then, and I also want to get Jeremy.
Can I actually jump in real quick? Because for the people listening, it is so challenging. And to Nancy's point before of like, what the heck do I do? I spent all of my time meeting with business owners, executive teams, and it is so difficult to get somebody to say, yeah, charge my card. I'll keep paying my bills. Don't worry about it. We just support. Understating that is crazy. That is so challenging in any business environment. I don't care if you're a retail shop, a consumer facing business, if you're B2B, like I know attorneys I work closely with that are hundreds of thousands of dollars off on their month over month revenue because they're not billing their work out. They're doing free work. These people cannot pay it. They don't want to pay it. They don't want to bill them. Like getting people to buy in and invest in you and saying, don't worry about it, and literally put their money where their mouth is. That is something that is so much easier said than done. And I just think it's a really good reminder that, look, politics aside, like building an amazing community is ultimately one of the best things you can do to protect against those other things. Like the government's going to do what they can do to preserve our quality of life in the way that they do it. But man, that is so challenging, and something that there are business owners that work 5 years, 10 years, a decade to foster a community where it's different when somebody buys from you. It's different. The other side of it, and what they've found, is people that are supporting the business. They're investing in the business when they do that. They may not have equity, they might not have shares, they may not get a dividend, right? But they're saying that I'd rather you take the money and keep doing what we're doing because it matters that much to the community and to me than for me to have the amount of money left. I know every person I've talked to has gone into quarantine mode and been like, I'm saving so much money because I'm not going anywhere spending money. The fact that they saw that and said, I'd rather you keep it, dude, that is, I mean, hearing that is like, and we talked about this on the podcast, like it is so ridiculously hard to do that in a business in less than 3 years. To understate that is crazy. And for those listening, like that is, think about your own habits. Did you call any of your vendors, like your gym, your Spotify, your iTunes? Did you say, hey, I want you to do well, keep bringing my card? Hell no. Right?
Thank you
You
for
know?
not making sure that we noted that.
It's hard.
It is
That is
hard.
hard. Like, yeah. All you, I had to jump in because it is so difficult.
I mean, just to the point, like I heard AMC is opening up mid-July, and if they don't, they're going to go bankrupt. And for me, I'm like, you know what, movies, I am a lifelong movie goer.
Right.
You know, I take my daughter to Frozen, and you know, that was something I did every day, but I'm kind of like, probably not going to go to a movie, and I'm not going to give AMC money to keep that theater, like, you know, because but to have created that, and I think, Jeremy, the word is community, you know, that support, and knowing that they are so invested that they're also thinking, and this is something I'm sure you guys in sales and stuff, it's the long-term path, because we're so much in the present, and what do we need now? You know, setting up those, it's very hard. You really have to have kind of, you know, work with someone to understand, you know, those mutual funds, or get in line. But yeah, no, and I'm so glad to hear it. And just, these are just my curiosities, because you know how I am. I think that one of my best things as a professor is I'm really curious about things. I want to know, you know, from how to box to what it's like ringside. Okay, as a gym owner, you say you want to be ready. Are there health officials who are making routines? Are they coming to certify you first, and they'll come back and check on you? I need to know this.
Great question. So I don't believe so, but I can tell you there's a local bar not right down the street from me. It's like an outdoor place, and they've been open, and I've been following it because I'm rooting for them. Obviously, you know, I think any business owner, like I'm feeling you, you know, I'm feeling for you, and I'm rooting for you, and you know, I hope you find success. But when they opened, a lot of people had an issue with it, and they were, you know, they got roasted on Twitter, they got roasted on social media, and there was pictures taken, and so much so that the police actually came by to shut them down. But they could prove that because they had small groups and they were operating at 30% capacity of whatever was on their occupancy permit. And for those who don't know, when you get your occupancy permit, that's basically this like piece of paper, almost looks like a diploma, that says how many people you can have in your place of business at any one time. To fire coding, there's like a whole formula they follow that the fire department weighs in on. But that's the final thing you get before you're like, now you can open doors and start your business. So they use that kind of as their reference, which was good. And the fact that they were outside was excellent as well.
Yeah.
But I can tell you that I don't want to be on the receiving end of that, because I just think that people have more of a understanding for the service industry in terms of like, you know, bars and social just situations than they do a fight gym, right? Regardless of how strong our community is, I just think that in general, you're going to be subject to some scrutiny, and people are going to say like, do you really need to do that? You know, I mean, geez, my father says that to me now, like, hey buddy, do you really need to go fight with this guy? He's, you know, he's in the UFC. What are you doing? You're a consultant. And I'm like, yeah, but I'm doing it. Right. And I think that mentality really overflows into just businesses right now. You know, you saw with the protests a while back, people were like, you're protesting to get your hair cut. Right. So I think that when you look at it strictly from a what the service is perspective, it's really easy to just blow something off like it's, you don't need it. Right now we're in a pandemic. But when you look at it from somebody's livelihood and the difference between them being able to put food on their table or pay their rent, I think that really changes the perspective. I don't drink. Everybody knows this, right? But I'm really hoping that this bar and this outdoor beer garden is able to stay open and find success, because I know that that employs a lot of different people. There's a huge economic factor within their community and their group.
Yeah, no. So good. I mean, I love, so today at 2, we're going to learn about what American University is.
Oh, okay.
Very interesting. I'll end on that, because these are the possibilities, but that's a huge group of students, faculty, staff. And so we're all kind of living in this world. So Jeremy, that takes me, because I know your job as a CPA, which I know you.
Do you want me to explain what I do real quick?
Yes, because okay,
yeah,
go.
So the core of my job is driving business. I'm in sales, right? But where traditional sales reps are knocking on doors, cold calling, working a territory, I did that for a few years. And what I do right now is I spend all of my time building relationships with CPA and accounting firms, whether they're the one-off bookkeepers or the institutions that have hundreds of employees. I figure out a way to bring in data, intelligence, insights, and strategies to the table that help their clients strengthen their bottom line and grow their business, right? There's a shift in how people are running businesses, where we've always looked at finance and money as capital, right? Something that you can use to drive a return. About 5 years ago, as we started getting more insight and data into the equation of how we run our companies and demographics and different insights, people are starting to understand that the shift from HR to seeing your people and human capital, that's where I spend most of my time. What is the return on the investment you're making in your people? Health insurance is going up, compensation is going up. Now we need flexible work, remote versus office hours. Our work is changing. Costs are going up, and we want our people to be happy, right? So the core of what I do is working with these CPA firms to help them be more strategic and drive a bigger impact with their clients. It results in me bringing in sales and business, but it's by having conversations that help people figure out, am I growing my business at the expense of my employees or by empowering my employees? That's the core of it.
So again, I can see why you're so fascinated with this community that's buying into Charles and the gym, because you're going to companies and saying, look what we can do for you, and this will benefit you. And because you're investing in your employees is important, and is going to grow your company down the line.
Look, I mean, there's public information that's out there. Look, the three line items on most businesses, expense sheet is rent, payroll, insurance. Those three items weigh the whole thing down, right? If we didn't have those three things, everybody'd be rich, right? But we have rent, we have payroll, we have insurance. What we try to understand is, where are we today and where's the market moving, right? So for example, COVID. As COVID, we're spending a lot of time focusing on the cases, which matter, the impact, which matters, the community, which matters. What we're not talking about is the fact that the major insurance companies are saying, we're losing a ton of money. We're hemorrhaging cash. We could have never projected the hospitalization associated with COVID. Insurance policies are corporate gambling. We believe that there's this much of a likelihood of it happening, but if it happens, we'll pay out this much. Yeah. Insurance companies are saying, didn't expect this to happen. So they're trying to figure out, how do we insulate our book of business to make sure we can stay open? And that's where, so if my insurance goes up 25%, I can't pass that off to my staff. They can't afford it. So unless I increase my fees 25%, then I just lost all my margins, right? And so we're in a unique situation right now where the markets are shifting, and small businesses, exactly like Charles in the gym. And I don't care if you're a federal contractor, a consulting firm, professional services, a college, right? Everybody has some level of expenditures that are required for them to operate their business. And our ability to control those expenses, either by driving them down and making them lower, or using them as a catalyst for growth, right? Yeah. That is the equation that we want to spend some time looking at, right? Like I was talking to a buddy the other day, actually, the Potomac Paddle Club. I shot them at any time I can. Small business in the area. They are the most fun you can have on the water in the Potomac. And it's eco-friendly, BYOB. You can go and they're operating under all the COVID requirements. But at the end of the day, you can go on, join your friends out, get a tour of the Potomac, and have some drinks and have some fun. And it's just an amazing time. Well, they have 2 boats that they came into the season with. Well, they have to pay to dock that one boat that they're not using with the demand. So the question is, like, can they rent it to somebody? Can they lease it? Who needs a boat that doesn't have the money? If I can get half my money for it, it's better than nothing, right? So it's getting back to the question of the same mentality around your people, right? Your level, like, engaged employees are more productive. Productive employees are less likely to turn over, leave, and cause problems,
Totally. And now this gets to the other thing in this innovation, shifting values. And we kind of talked about this in terms of, well, right now, working out may not be, or getting sparring may not be on top of the line, because I'm just basically want to save money. You also, I think that, Charles, you brought up the idea that it's socially, you don't want to look like you are callous. And, so we have this also, like, scrutiny, I guess is the word. So how does that affect your business? Like, I'm talking retail, shops, high heels. I'll be honest, I am someone who loves fashion, stuff like that. I have not worn a high heel shoe in 3 months. And I'm starting to think like, why did I wear something that was a spike and cause pain, and I had to take them off after an hour anyway. Is that changing? What do businesses do that have this, and both of you guys, because you're entrepreneurs, what do they do, and we can shift this into martial arts as well, because I like, especially like UFC and boxing. What's your advice there?
Jeremy, you want to start?
It comes down to why, right? Most things come down to why. And so, for example, the reason that district martial arts has been massively successful through what is arguably one of the most challenging events in the last decade is because the people on the other end of that credit card have a very, very confident, clear, defined why as to what they do and why they're engaging in that organization.
Yeah.
When, I spend a lot of my time with these firms trying to make the shift from a vendor to a partner.
Mm-hmm.
And the distinction is respect, clarity, and mutual value, right? And so when we work with organizations and when, Charles is building community and you're figuring out how do we navigate this, it ultimately comes down to why are they working with you, right? So the difference of buying, going shopping, buying clothes and retail shops, the end of the day, the consumer is going to make a decision on, is it a want, a need, or is it frivolous, right? And they're going to have to make a decision with themselves proactively or passively. To be honest, some people aren't actively saying I should stop doing that, right? It's like dieting, right? I know I shouldn't eat it as a thought, but sometimes we don't even consider it, right?
Yeah.
Eat the whole friggin' pizza. But it comes down to the why. And so when I and this is marketing, branding, this is everything in business. It's understanding not what is your sales pitch, it's why does it matter to the person on the other end of that message. And for DMA, they've done an incredible job of delivering why. You guys don't sell martial arts, you sell therapy for a lot of people because they work their tail off and they want to go for an hour and they want to work a different muscle. They want to do something else. And it's not about the money, it's about the mental health. It's about the community. They'd rather spend an hour in that gym working out, getting that mentality engaged than going and getting a drink with the same people because it doesn't work the same thing, right? And so it comes down to the why. What is the exchange of value? And when the exchange of value is strong enough and people, because what people do, and this is where I kind of leverage that other point of view, it's like when people say, Charles, keep running my card, they're not saying, we love you, here's my money. They're saying, I don't want you to leave my life. Stay in business and I'm happy to give you a little bit of love along the way. That's what they're really saying. Because if they didn't care if you closed your doors, they wouldn't try to help you stay afloat. Nobody's bailing water on the Titanic, right? They're like, I'm going to jump, right? Once they realize they're like, no, I want this thing to stay afloat. It matters to me. They become a partial non-equity owner in the process. And if you can build that, then that's the best insurance policy you have against the growth of your business.
That's fascinating. Charles, do you have anything you want to add to this in terms of the why, which I think, and this is where a store that I would go to, a boutique, they would tell me why it's important to have, something to make myself feel better. The mental health that comes from taking care of yourself, right? That's what they should be reminding me or could be reminding me. Because and yeah, I definitely want Charles to jump in here because I do think that a lot of us would do the passive spending, this passive decisions all the time. And I think a lot of us maybe we're in a hamster wheel of, I got to go to a restaurant, I got to go out, I got to travel somewhere. And when that has been stopped, you kind of question, well, why did I want to go out? And so I think it really pulls us, but it actually, if you can innovate at this time and decide this is how we're going to brand ourselves or remind our customers why we're here, it can be, you can maybe harness that. Charles, like, what do you think? Does that ring true to what's going on with district martial arts?
Well, first off, both you guys gave really good answers. And Jeremy, that's a tough one to follow. I should have actually gone first, I think. But, before I get to district martial arts, I think, Nancy, to your point, people go into, or they adapt to a way of life, right? So for example, for me, my way of life and my big problem was that I was eating out all the time. it wasn't necessarily even at a nice restaurant. It would just be the convenience of going to grab something after I worked, had the gym, pursued any other interests. I mean, all these other things I'm doing, I'm like, I'm not cooking. But I was spending so much more money on food that, to be honest with you, wasn't that good. And I'm a pretty good cook, you know? So being home and having this additional time, that's where I'm like, okay, so if I'm looking at my monthly budget, because I'm the type of guy where I write down every single thing I spend, I put it in an Excel sheet at the end of the month. I see what I'm doing, and I do it the old fashioned way, because I feel like just like writing helps you memorize things, forcing myself to type it in is a reminder of, oh, you just spent that money, just left your account, and I hope it was worth it. So my way of life has changed because now I'm spending more time cooking food. I'm eating more things I like, quite frankly, and I'm eating a little bit better too. So in that regard, that's how that changed. So with high heels, well, your way of life has changed in the sense that you haven't had to put on high heels. But what I will tell you is that when things do get back to normal, and eventually they will, that need will arise again. So my concern for those businesses isn't necessarily pivoting, which I think is such an easy thing to say, like, oh, you have to pivot and adapt to the environment. Yes, but I think right now we have a temporary environment, right? How am I selling Tiffany's? If I own Tiffany's, how am I selling jewelry if nobody's wearing it?
Yeah.
Well, right now I have to find a way to survive until people will start wearing it again, and they will. For district martial arts, we thought a lot about what can we do? How can we, basically our whole conversation was, how do we keep people paying? Because we're offering a service that's equivalent to what they signed up for. And our decision was that we couldn't, which is why we went ahead and we froze everybody's membership without asking for anything. Hey guys, this is what we're doing. We're offering virtual classes. We're going to give you some instructionals. We're going to stay engaged. We're going to give you daily workouts, but this isn't what you signed up for. The value, while we feel it's high and we're proud of it, is not nearly as good as what was happening when you were coming in, tying your gi belt, putting on your boxing gloves, and going to work. So we did everything we could on the adaptability side, but the reality was our goal had to be to survive until we can get to the point where we can offer that service that everybody came back for, right? That everybody went to. And if anybody says, well, things will change, I would disagree, because we have UFC fights going on right now, and those guys are still in the gym, they're still training, and they've had to make some adjustments. But at the end of the day, their goal is to get back to sparring, get back to being in close contact, doing all of these individual arts to improve their overall game. That's something that's inevitable. And it's just a matter of surviving through this time.
Surviving. No, and that's great. I wonder, Charles, if you had decided not to freeze the accounts and said, I know we're not giving, you're not allowed to go to the gym, but we really need your money, so no cancellations. What would that have done to, I think that you might have had a backlash, right? Or did,
Absolutely. Absolutely. How can I say in one sentence, I'm so proud of this community that we have, where, for my birthday, I don't even invite my friends or the gym. I just invite everybody at the gym, right? And we're watching fights and we're hanging out, and I don't really care. We're just spending, how can I do that in one sentence? And then in the other say, ooh, sorry guys, now I'm going to look at you as strictly a customer and I need your money and pay me.
Oh.
Like, that's crazy to me, and that community is the give and take relationship, just like friendships. If you have a friendship or a boyfriend or girlfriend where you do 90% and they do 10, I can tell you that's not an equitable arrangement. It should be a two-way street. So obviously a gym is a little bit different because we're the service provider and they're paying for the service, but it's got to be a two-way street. I can't, if they're going to be a part of the community, I have to be there just as much for them as they have been for me. And I'm really proud to say that that has been the case.
No, and yeah, no, I know that I had some subscriptions that just kept going, and I was just like, wow, I'm not using I can't remember what it was, a Pilates, so nothing near, and I'm just like, wow, they re-upped me, and I think it would have been so nice if they had maybe asked or had done like what you did, which is interesting that you actually froze and people said, no, please let me pay you, which just,
right.
Yeah. That's a lot. So Jeremy, I also want to talk about, and Charles, because I listened to your podcast with that you were on, Charles, on Jeremy's first, and I thought you did a really good job of kind of describing what UFC has done in terms of packaging cards. and making it so that when you come in Saturday night, you know that there are 13 fights and there's going to be great matchups. You're going to probably have heard of some of them, but maybe not all. But it's going to be skills and you're going to see something interesting. Like that's what I expect, you know. I don't know if you guys watched boxing, started on Tuesday. Whoa. Okay. First of all, I couldn't figure out, there were supposed to be 6, then Michaela Mayer actually tested positive on Sunday, so her fight, which was co-main. I was really looking forward to that. I couldn't find the other fights, and here's why. I mean, there were 5 total fights. The betting odds, I've never seen them. They were in the thousands, which means, Jeremy, mixed matches. I mean, it was just, they brought in, one had only 2 professional fights, or 3. So obviously they're going on this top. We had Shakar Stevenson, and that was a mismatch as well. I have to say, I found the experience, like, this does not make me want to watch boxing. I don't know if you caught that match, and if not, you didn't miss anything. Charles, what do you think about because they had more time? Bob Arum, how come you didn't have the UFC 249 that we were waiting for?
It's a great question. So I don't know if you noticed, but I felt their production was excellent. I mean, they had all these screens, like it didn't look like it was an empty roller rink. Whereas I think with the UFC right now, even though they're doing such a great job, and we could talk all about that, I think that the Apex Center is a little bit underwhelming. When they do those pans of the venue, and clearly they did great light work, but it looks like there's just so much empty space, right? Like when you're putting on an event, you don't want there to be empty seats, and if there's no seats available, you just don't want there to be empty space. Yeah. And I think Top Rank did a really good job of giving you the perception that that was not the case.
Yeah.
The matchups, yeah, that was a little bit concerning because there's so many, especially in the fight sport. If you're a full-time fighter or even a part-time fighter, I have a couple guys who are competing at the professional level, and it's not their full-time job, but they're still willing to go down to Florida. They're still willing and able to. There are so many people who are relying on fighting for their paycheck. I have a hard time believing that that was the best talent you were able to pull up. So what I would suspect might have been the case is you're like, hey, I got this great opportunity for you. I'm going to pay you a little bit, but you got to fight this killer. And hey, if you win, your life changes. But if you lose, no worries. We'll give you another one. So what they can do is they can get those guys fights. They can get these killers a tune-up fight effectively, and they can keep their budget low. So because they're not making a live gate, they can decrease the amount of money they have to spend on purses, and they could cut corners in all these different areas so that their P&L, their profit and loss, looks a lot closer to what it would have been, maybe not in terms of total numbers, but maybe in terms of net revenue in their pocket.
But for me, I totally understand. And you know what, business-wise, it makes sense. This is the boxing model, right? Jeremy, what this hurts me is that I want to know the stories. How can I know the story of someone who's only had 3 fights and have no idea? I can't even find the information alive. And so don't you think that that's going to have a negative impact on their product?
Me or Jeremy?
Oh, either.
Jeremy, do you want to take this one? Oh, okay. All right. So yeah, absolutely. I think but this goes back to what we had talked about with survivability. How did these promotions survive? And the UFC has not only managed to survive, but they've managed to thrive. I mean, they've like really done something incredible here. And now there's other issues that I hope we get to in terms of fighter pay and like public perception right now. But they've done, from a testing perspective, I don't want to say everything right, but they've done the absolute best. I mean, people are getting tested multiple times. They're under quarantine. They have a whole system in place. They have answers to the questions that are being asked. And I think that part is really key. For Top Rank, this is their first show, and they're not in maybe a warm situation, whereas the UFC was down, I believe, in Jacksonville, which had virtually, their restrictions were just like kind of like no crowd. They didn't really have strong coronavirus restrictions. What a lot of people don't know is the UFC were the ones who had all of those tests and made sure that they covered their end of the bargain. But that wasn't necessarily the requirement from Jacksonville. The Nevada State Athletic Commission, they have much more stringent standards, and they actually had a plan. They had a good way to say, okay, you want to have a live event? These are the rules you have to follow. These are the guidelines you have to follow to do so. So Top Rank might have been like, hey, look, this is our first go. Let's just get it out there. We're going to put it on a Tuesday night, not a primetime event. Let's show some people some boxing. Let's show them our production value, and let's learn as we go throughout this whole coronavirus event process. And that's the impression that I'm under, just because of the way it all kind of shaked out. It was a short card. It wasn't really packed with talent on both ends, right? Matchup wise. And even though they've had a lot of time to get fighters and put cards together and work on their negotiations, they haven't really had a test drive yet. They haven't really been able to get their feet wet in this new environment. So I think for them, the whole boxing community might have been watching, saying, how are they doing it? What mistakes did they make? What lessons can we learn? And what was the viewership? Because if the viewership is low, you're not going to be bringing in revenue. And if you're not bringing in revenue, you're not going to survive.
But maybe boxing survival is that, I mean, this is no joke that this is nothing new to them. You have I think I saw that the big news was that Tyson Fury, Anthony Joshua, 2 fights in 2021. That's where they're going to make their money, right? That's how they're going to survive, is keep that people knowing. And I guess for me, what I enjoy about like UFC, mixed martial arts, is I get to learn the stories, and I want to tune in so that I see what you're saying. They have product out there just to hold space. They're going to get revenue from ESPN. ESPN has to pay Top Rank. And it's just, for me, and who knows, this may not even be an opportunity that it's one of the only live sports going on now. Because I don't even think ESPN is really promoting it. You know, I think I've seen more old fights and other things, you know.
Yeah.
So maybe boxing knows that it's not, that because their structure is, you have these mismatches, it's tune-up fights, no one cares about the people we don't know until they get to that top percentile. Jeremy, I don't know if you like any ideas on boxing versus MMA.
Yeah, and so I'll preface to those tuning in, like Nancy and Charles are much more informed on the industry and the talent than I am. The thing I will add is, I think they have a storytelling problem, and I'll give you one example of what I mean by that. Is, you guys remember SportsCenter, like the Stuart Scott era, when they used to, instead of advertising the celebrity aspect, they took you behind the scenes and they made their anchors like the celebrities of The Office. And it wasn't about fame, it was about humor, it was about personality. There's always a story to tell. The challenge is, I think that what it seems like is, UFC intimately understands the story they're telling, and they understand how to package the athletes, figuring out where they are in their journey as a product. That's at the end of the day what they are. And we'll talk, I'm sure, later about, you know, like how they're managed. But the fact is, the fighter's a product. They're selling the product, interacting with another product in front of a camera to millions of people. And we hope, based on pay-per-view, ad dollars, people buy it. But the challenge is, when you don't understand what you're trying to accomplish, and it feels like boxing, to your point, what do we do? Are we like this for boxing could have been a great challenge. Say, we want to bring in people that aren't traditionally watching boxing. Can we find new interest, right? Because it's either that, or do we deepen the engagement from our existing base, right? If you find your fighters that have minimal experience, it's about how do we package the potential of what this fight could be, right? You have to tell compelling stories that give you some reason to ask what could happen and what's next. And for us, it has nothing to do with the fight. It's not about who wins and loses. It's what is possible if they win, what is possible if they lose, and what would that mean, and what happens if I miss it, right? It almost needs to be like, and this may not be the most eloquently stated example, but it's kind of like going on a road trip. What happens if I miss that rest stop?
Yeah.
Right? You need to understand that it's like, this is one fight in a journey of a career where they could be the next thing. They could go into this route. But what happens if I miss that? You don't want to miss that. That moment matters. It might be 2 rounds. It might be 12 rounds. They're just not storytelling it. They're just saying, we have a fight to watch. It's like, that's what baseball does. We have 80, 100 and something games. Come check out a game. They're 9 innings long. They're going to take 3 hours. There's 2 minutes of gameplay, and Mazel Tov, have a day, right? So, like, they're selling you a fight instead of selling you a part of a journey with two people fighting for the next phase in that journey. And I think that UFC has done an absolutely incredible job of, I don't know enough about it compared, relative to you folks, but they don't storytell well. They don't give me a reason to buy in and be curious about what could happen. It's just about two people throwing fists.
Yeah, no, and it's certainly that. You're right. I want to be a part of the journey. I think Ian Heinisch, I was so sad because he has this great backstory where he was caught as a drug mule and spent a couple years in a Spanish prison where he developed his Spanish wrestling style, and some island off of Spain, and then came back and is now, that's why when he wasn't going to fight for a little bit, I was like, because I want to see his journey. And I think he's fighting again.
Yeah, end of June.
Yes. So I have to ask you, what do you think about, they've obviously been successful. I haven't heard about Jacare. I've been trying to ask, is he going to be able to fight soon? And, because he was a positive test. But I have seen them learning to the UFC in terms of and also I think it's because Nevada put, extra precautions. And I like that if a journalist comes in, they get tested, they're quarantined in a hotel room, and, they're very much, and we don't see, the commentators are not interacting like they did in Florida. They're keeping them separate. And I think they are doing the headsets to interview. As a commentator, what do you think about this? And they're just innovating, and do you lose anything?
So I want to get to that. One thing I want to add about the storytelling. Yeah. Boxing does have such a rich history of storytelling. For those that don't know, the 24/7 series, which is kind of like the UFC Countdown, that was developed by boxing, right? So they've done such a good job in the past. And I think there has been a drop off for sure, to both your points. But this is somewhat new because for a while they had all the stories, and if you look at what ESPN's doing right now, a lot of the things that they're pushing the most are their stories, right? The 30 for 30. They're doing all these different things that aren't really reflective of live sports.
Yeah. Oh, I didn't. Right? Yeah.
It's just an interesting time. It's just and it's interesting decision making as well. I suspect it has more to do with the budget and the matchups, right? You're not creating a story in the matchups, so then you're not going to spend the money to talk about that story. But going to your point with commentary, so I'll be honest, guys, I did one jiu-jitsu competition in March just before things shut down. And I'm really lucky for that because it got me some reps. I'm not very I don't know heel hooks and leg locks that well. I can see them in MMA, but in jiu-jitsu, the setups are much more intricate. So I got to work on some of my weaknesses, and I just got to get in front of a microphone and talk about what's happening. So there's so much value there. But prior to that, the last Cowboy Fight Series event was in December. It was 2 weeks right after your writing and fighting event. And I haven't seen any local shows have consistent dates of things that are happening. Now, there was one, I know, July 18th, but that's still not confirmed yet. That still might not be allowed due to the guidelines from coronavirus. So a lot of these local promotions, and before I get to the commentary, I feel like I can't talk about that until I talk about the reason all these promotions aren't starting. They're dependent upon the live gate. The live gate is the money you make from ticket sales, concessions, all of that. So if you have to rent out a venue to put your cage in the middle, and then you film it and you put it on YouTube or maybe a streaming service, maybe they give you a deal. There's no way that they're going to generate enough revenue and enough ad space to justify sponsorships, to justify your expenses that you pay to put on these fights. It's just not a feasible way to do things. So I suspect we won't really see the live events until maybe September or August. And then you're going to see a lot of them, which I think will present a different issue because for the regional level, there's only so much talent. So even though you have all these people who are ready to fight, they're not under contract. They're going to go to whoever gives them the first offer and so on and so forth. For commentary, look, I've been getting the itch, right? So I'm still trying to communicate with as many people as I can. I'm still talking. I'm close with the Cowboy Fight Series team, and I know that everybody's ready and they want to get started and they want to work. But for a lot of these local shows, or even national, I mean, the PFL shut down, right? Like, it's just not that feasible for them to start up with all the additional costs and all the lack of revenue that they're making. The UFC, I think what they're doing is great in terms of their commentary team, because they have everybody set, like, they're spread out, but they can see each other. So that's one key. It's not like I'm over here and then somebody else is on the other side. They're kind of sitting in like almost like an L shape, where you can see, you know, John can see DC and Joe Rogan, and they can look at one another when they're talking, and they know there's nonverbal cues that you will only get when you're sitting next to somebody. And I think that they're still able to get that, which is why you haven't heard them interrupt each other as much as you would expect.
Yeah.
But for, you know, one championship, which I know they're talking about doing virtual commentary. Now, I think that's changed because they've delayed, but when they were trying to put an event on prior to the rest of the world opening up, they were talking to people about doing commentary from the comfort of their own homes. I would love that. I would do that in a heartbeat.
Did they do that with boxing? I know that some of them, they weren't on the ring. I don't know if they were in a room or something. And I did see some people who definitely had the Zoom background. So I'm curious, and they've been doing that for Korean baseball. That's been, they're taking like, oh God, what's her name? Some of the commentators from ESPN are there giving their own, you know, because obviously I don't speak Korean, so that would have. So I think that that's an interesting innovation, because we get more people to hear from when it wouldn't have been possible because they can't be at that location. And then two things I want to ask you about that. First, this kind of idea that we're going to lose people. Like, everyone's been talking about this card, Jessica Ai versus Cynthia Cabello, as definitely getting, I don't want to say like the metaphor bottom of the barrel, but we've had so many great fights. We've had, what, 5 cards? So it's been a lot. And so obviously you can't run, you need to have some breakdown. Now, this is what I've heard. I think Luke Thomas talked about this when he came to my class. And Nikki Aguirre, who you've called a fighter, bantamweight out of Alliance BJJ in San Diego, she thinks she might be called up earlier because the need for fighters. Now, is that something that you think that these small promotions may have to just kind of like, this one's ready? And
so the UFC back in March reached out to, I know a couple matchmakers and I know a couple agents, and they reached out to them and they basically said, anybody who's ready, get them ready. Ready is, let me rephrase that. Anybody who is starting to approach that UFC level, get them ready physically so that they can be called up for a short notice fight. We saw that with Erwin Rivera. So that's actually, oddly enough, that's a fighter who was born in Newburgh, New York, same town as myself. And I scouted him for Combate Americas. And by scouting him, I actually got the job there. Small world. Another one is Brandon Royval, who I actually told a story about that on Reddit that made its way back to him. And that was what I sent to you. It got shared on Twitter, and then me and him are now talking on Instagram, and it became this whole thing. But he got this opportunity because there is a gap. You have no international fighters who can get into the US right now. You have a variety of different reasons why some people might not be able to fight. And depending on where you live, you might not be able to train. So obviously Florida has been doing well, but if you were in New York, let's say, you probably had a really difficult time getting the work you need, if not at the gym itself, with the right sparring partners, with the right training partners, with your coaches. You know, if your coach is older and maybe not in the best health, can he go with you, right? We saw Ray Longo didn't go with Aljamain Sterling this past weekend. So I think there's a lot of factors that go into it. But to your point, there is a very good chance that we're going to get people elevated maybe before they're ready, or maybe just at the right time, and they're going to not have to jump through the same hoops they would have had to otherwise. There's been a lot of guys who've had so many fights and they've gotten so close, and then they lose one, they win 4, they get another look, then they lose a close split decision, and that's just the way their career is gone. So I do think there is opportunity for people right now. In regards to this weekend's card, this might be a situation where, so my bias is that the guy I do commentary with, Paul Robertson, he's fighting in the co-main event.
Yes, well, that's
so I'm
about story
very excited
that he created.
Right. So I'm really looking forward to that.
Tori, I am very excited about that too. And I actually think it's a great matchup skill wise, everything. So you're right. Talk about, though, we've had conversations about how with social media, fighters now, they don't have to rely on their promotion to create their storyline. Do it yourself, post something.
Right.
And then the crowd, the audience is like, I need to see them fight, so very interesting.
Well, and just to finish up that point too, I think that so much, sure, the card might not be the most in depth, but the UFC is the only sport going on right now. I'm really excited for it. And I'm, look, have I been clamoring for a Jessica Cynthia Calvillo matchup? Maybe not, right? But I'm going to appreciate it. I'm going to watch it. And I think there's so much negativity on Twitter right now. I mean, God, I'm extra polite online. And I remember the other week I was talking about the fights and somebody made a mistake. And I was like, oh, it was actually this. And then it turned into a situation where I had two people making fun of me, commenting. These are verified people with thousands of followers, literally just basically calling me an idiot when I wanted to be like, hey man, like, what are we doing? Like, this is crazy. Like, there's just no reason for all that negativity when I'm just grateful we have fights on.
I agree. So I want to take this to Jeremy in terms of, look at what we're seeing, this innovation in terms of, you might have had 2 more years to jump through hoops because you had to get through the small promotions. And I'm thinking of Nikki's boyfriend, Sadiq, who got into Bellator, but then lost fight, and he got sent back down again. And that's the way it is. But now they need fighters, And so, Jeremy, are there other places that you see that, especially because I'm talking to my students all the time, and internships aren't happening right now. Obviously, jobs, you don't want to enter an economy in a job market like this. Have you found some, I ask, like, with your conversations with all these unique individuals, what do you have to say? Like, where is there some hope?
Yeah, awesome question. And also to Charles's point, there's a lot of negativity. So it's nice to take a beat and smile for a minute, because there are some good things happening. And so there is hope. And so it's funny that you asked that, and I put up a post about this yesterday on Facebook. And I think a lot of people look for other people to give them hope in a way that keeps them in motion. And what I challenge people to do is, if you look at the post, it basically said, like, I'll give you the quick story. Like, I got off a podcast yesterday with a gentleman, and I had this euphoric thing after I got off the podcast. It was just like, damn, I loved it. It's so fun. It was such a good conversation. Same when I talked with you guys, and it was just one of those things. And I met that gentleman on LinkedIn by messaging him in his LinkedIn messages, saying, I love your stuff. This is kind of what I do. Would love to see if you're open to a call. We got on a call 5 days later, and we recorded a podcast. And it was just like so fun and natural. And it just reaffirmed the fact that, look, we cannot control all the bad luck that happens. Like Charles in the gym, like, you guys grew the business, you executed in the first location, you took a leap, and shit happened. Pardon the language, right? Like, we can't always control when bad things happen, and we can't control always the unfortunate events. But I'm a firm believer that if you are consistently curious, meeting new people, learning new things, gaining new perspectives, that bank of relationships, knowledge, and perspective is the insurance policy against when that thing inevitably happens. So to the graduates that are coming out of high school in 2020, I challenge you, look, the job market is tough. But you know what? Some of the largest companies in the world were started in 2008. The iPhone came out in 2000. Like we need to kind of reverse engineer a little bit about what we're thinking about. Big things happen in down markets. Generational wealth is made in down markets. A lot of possibilities take place. So for those that maybe are looking for a transactional piece of advice, it's are you meeting new people? Are you learning new things that you can build into your skill set? Because for me, for example, right, I work a full-time job. I have a marketing agency on the side, the podcast. Let's pretend I got fired, laid off, and I had no job. But I did my podcast. And I've met people like Charles and Nancy. I've learned a new perspective. 50, 75 interviews later, I've had a breadth of conversations. I've learned new things. Well, I have new relationships to talk to. Hey, Nancy, I'm actually looking for work. Do you know anybody looking for somebody in sales? right? My ability to have a new web of people that I love, trust, respect, and admire turns into the ability to have options. I'm a firm believer for people that are in a situation where they feel it's negative and it's tough. And it's, look, are you putting yourself in a position to have options? It's not like I'm not out here preaching like financial this and that. Like, are you in a position to have options? And right now, a lot of folks are in a position where they feel like they have no options. The job market's tough. 40 million Americans are unemployed. Nobody's hiring. Okay. So let me ask you this. Are you going to go on LinkedIn and like, I literally tell people this all the time when they debate going to get an MBA, go on LinkedIn, find somebody in your industry, look at their career path. They will say company, McKinsey, masters, go message them. Hey, Alex, it looks like you took a career path I'm debating and it's worked really well for you. And I admire what you've accomplished. Would you be against a 5-minute phone call? I'd love to ask ask you a couple questions and just get your perspective. I'm telling you, if you have no jobs, no opportunity, no outlet, and you just spend a little bit of time just doing that, if you have 3 of those calls a week, 12 a month, I promise you, you will leave better than you would to the other people doing nothing. And that for me is where the hope is. It's just a question of, do we want, I look at most arguments. Are we looking for a solution or are we looking for an argument? In a tough market, I just challenge people. Are we looking to have problems or are we looking to find solutions? And for those that are engaged and motivated, the hope is in you are in control. You may not be in control of them hiring you, but you're in control of the effort. Go message people, connect with people, have conversations, gain a new perspective, and share with people what you're trying to do. Good people want to help people that they see a little bit in their self. That's why I like in interviews. I'm always like, when people are like, what question should I ask? Ask them, hey, if I were to work here, what would you recommend that I remember and I apply so that my first 6 months are a success? Because when they give you advice, they want you to apply it and win because it makes them look good and it shows that you're coachable, right? So people want to help people when they're engaged. And so for me, the beacon of hope is knowing you are in control in some capacity if you would like to be in control.
Yes, I love that. I love the idea of connecting. And you're right. More often than not, people want to help each other. And the ones who don't get back with you, they're usually the minority, and then that saves you time. I love that you're talking about solutions because I have a couple more questions if you guys can hang in there.
Yeah.
I set this up with you because this is now kind of one of the top topics in MMA in terms of fighter pay. And is this moment because of what's happening? Conor McGregor has retired once again. We have Masvidal saying he's out. And, we've always talked about this. This came up in the MMA symposium for AU back in December. Angela Hill, I think, brought up that it has to be one of these big guys to say things need to change in terms of the people who actually are the 1% who actually have the power. Charles, I'd love to have your thoughts.
Yeah, and I hate to do this again, but I want to just point out, Jeremy, that one point you made, are we looking for problems or are we looking for solutions? That really hit home with me because in all of these conversations, I feel like sometimes I'm looking at the problem and I'm not coming up with the right solution. And that just like clicked for me big time. So thank you for that, Jem. Jeremy's always throwing out good like quotes that I feel like could be written down and put in a book.
All love, man.
What's going, Jeremy? Okay.
All love, all love.
To answer the question, so I think if there was ever a time to make a move for fighter pay, I think you really could make the argument that it's right now. Mm-hmm. Henry Cejudo, John Jones, Jorge Masvidal. I think, Conor McGregor, that one's a little bit different because I think he's getting paid plenty. I think for him, it's more getting what he wants, right? He had the opportunity to slide in and fight Tony Ferguson. He didn't. Justin Gaethje got it. And now Justin Gaethje is fighting Khabib. Yeah. Conor wanted to fight the winner. It didn't happen that way. That's just, so I think his might have more to do with that. He's not able to dictate the terms. He kind of was like, I'll fight Anderson Silva. And that doesn't really move the needle, I think. It's just kind of a weird thing to say that you're going to do. Yeah. But to Angela Hill's point, it's not just a big name fighter who says, hey, we need to get paid more, because the big name guys are getting paid well. And maybe not as well as they should, but compared to the lower level or the mid-level guys who are career fighters, there was a lot of salaries on that card last weekend that were in the $40,000 to $60,000 range that really should have been in the $400,000 to $600,000 range. I mean, there's just so much that goes into it. And without knowing the true numbers, I want to know, as a finance guy, I want to know, what is the percent of revenue that goes to the fighters? What's the breakdown? They're saying it's 16 to 18%.
Yeah.
I mean, I could tell you that any defense I had of the organization went right out the window if that's the case. So
yeah,
it's not just the big fighters who are taking a stand for the little guys, right? It's also, how do you make the organization feel it in their pockets? So what you need is, basically an organized group, and you need people to say, I'm not fighting, I'm not fighting, and I'm not fighting. So all of a sudden the UFC goes 2, 3, 4, 5 events in a row that get canceled because people aren't signing contracts, right? That's how you make an impact and you get change. However, if I'm the UFC, I'd be like, okay, cool. Here's a bigger check to this person, and I want that person to fight. And their life just changed, right? So if the top 10, nobody in the top 10 is going to fight the champ, right? Who's doing pretty well until they get a new contract. If you're the 11th ranked guy in the world and you get an offer to fight for the title and change your life and make your family never want again, would you not take it? I would. If UFC called me and they said, hey, Charles, we need somebody to get beat up by Kamaru Usman, I'm doing it just so I can try to make a case to do commentary. Just for my commentary career, I'm going to go get that ass whooping, right? And that would undoubtedly cost other fighters. And I say that with full honesty, obviously not selfishness, but honesty. And if you're hurting for an opportunity and you get it, you're going to take it. So how do you balance the idea of having all these fighters work together, not fight, to gain, coming together as a group, collective bargaining, versus the fighters who are going to get those bigger checks? And that's the problem.
Indeed. And I think Ray Maynard and even Angela said, sometimes the checks are little like under the table work. So
hush money,
so that, they're showing fighters, don't worry, people won't know that this is what's happening, that you're, I don't even know the equivalent, a scab or, someone, but it is tough to say, we're going to do this. This is, a strike, I think is what you're saying, and this has happened in other leagues, baseball, NBA, hockey. But guess what? Look at those revenues. Isn't it like 50% goes to the players, or so it's interesting. I think this is a moment, but I also know, like, I always say I would never feel at all bad that someone said, like, I'm taking this fight, because to go, and especially if, like, we're talking probably just coming into UFC, you're making 10 and 10 or 12 and 12, right?
Right. So
yeah,
the issue with the economics of it, right? So when we say 10 and 10, 12 and 12, the UFC has a much stronger middle class. And I think this is what Max Kellerman said, than boxing. And if you look at the other organizations, a lot of their, like Bellator will pay guys $1,000, but then they give them a cut of ticket sales and their local guys, and that's how they fill the stands. Yeah. And that, combined with the TV deal, is how they get away with paying some guys pretty big money. Mm-hmm. With the UFC, it is some difficult economics, because I think public perception right now is, if somebody's talking like Jorge Masvidal, I'm a huge fan of Jorge Masvidal, and I think he should get paid more than he does. But he had this really tough negotiation after finally earning a title shot, preparing, putting in all that effort. He had a difficult negotiation where up until the 11th hour, he was going to be making less money than he had made in his last fight. And now, and this is for the real belt, not just the BMF belt. And then at the 11th hour, they were like, all right, we'll pay you the same. And at that point, the damage was done. The fight was off. And now we have Gilbert Burns stepping up to the title. So that whole situation is kind of an example of what happens every single time we get one of these big pushes. The MMAAA, I think that was what it was, or the MMMAA. It was a very confusing one, right? There was a lot of big fighters on there who all of a sudden just kind of were like, oh, I'm not touching this. And a lot of that has to do with they started getting checks that changed their life. So can you blame them? It's not selfishness. It's not, it's like this weird environment of, hey, we all want to do better. But if I have the opportunity to not struggle, I'm going to take it.
Yeah. And then there's this other side of, this savviness, you could say, of Dana White to create this structure. Yes, but he's also, look what he's done in terms of creating the storylines and the packaging. And, so, I understand, because I look at other, like the boxing world, which is not really that much better. One thing that they have is that the purses, you never have win money, which I think, Jeremy, what they do is you get 10 to show, 10 to win. So basically, if you lose, you get half your money. I see it, because I think that if you do a job, you should be getting what you're compensated. I think like that's something that they could maybe change. What about you?
Me or
I'm curious to jump in for a second.
please.
And so I look at the music industry as a point of reference here, because a lot of musicians look for the label and the signing process to be the saving grace to the career. And I think the ability to build leverage as an independent artist, right? You have your following, you have your TuneCore, where you own and actually have your ownership over your music, where you're able to build leverage going into the negotiation with the agency, really, to say, look, if you want to partner or if you want to sign me, you need to understand that I already have 3 albums out. I have this much success. I've done a tour already that sold out. I have demand with or without you. And building enough of credibility where when a label says, hey, we'll get you on radio, we'll get you here, we can do the distribution, and you can call and say to them, that's lovely and I want it. You got to understand, like, I'm already making this much a month for my music sales, my royalties, my deals, because I've done the work to build a business around this talent. That, like, I don't need you to build the business around my talent. And I think when we look at the fighting space, one I'm still learning about, I find it to be a similar game where they focus on the talent that is getting in the ring, as opposed to building a business around the talent, right? Because at the end of the day, you're selling your skills in the ring as a figure and a fighter. And your ability to build the value around that and package yourself as a business, I look at it and say, can they build more leverage to go to the negotiating table? Because right now, all they have is, I can fight or I don't fight, right? The UFC and the agencies, they need people to fight to have something to sell the world as a product of entertainment. Excuse me. But it's something I'm still learning. Like, can they build value so that when they go to the table to negotiate that deal, they can say, well, look, you got to understand, I've not only been fighting around the world, I've been doing this, but look at my following, look at my community. We did $1 million last year in merch myself through my website, right? So if you want a cut of what I'm doing, I need to understand where my value comes in besides getting in the ring. And I don't know what that looks like. I know early on, and I don't know if it's still the case, like the MLB was, like, baseball was so strict on distribution of content, like they would take it down if it wasn't from the MLB. So there's legal standing on how they issue their marketing and build their strategies. But I look at it in the same way. Can the fighters build leverage and invest in themselves? Maybe they're making $50,000 a year. But what if they took 10 of that and they built their own little marketing department to say, I'm going to make me as effective and desirable as possible so that people buy into me wherever I'm fighting. Then you go to Dana White and you're like, look, I'm a business. I'm not a fighter. You want to partner with me? I want to be a part of it. And so I'd love your guys' thoughts, because I don't know if that's theory and wish-wash, or if it's viable, or if it's actually happening, and I just don't know it. But that's what I'm kind of eager to see is McGregor did that. They didn't just make him. He was making himself.
Charles, can you take this? Because I know you were very close with Brian Butler, one of the major managers of fighters.
So Brian Hamper, actually, who's his partner, but they're very close. And I know Brian. They're both great guys. Yeah. To Jeremy's point, I think that is a medication you take to get rid of the symptoms, right? So that strategy is highly effective in circumnavigating the current landscape. But I think for the broader change for everybody on a macro level, you need to rearrange the way things are done. Now, what I would tell you is that I think we should clip that and send that to every fighter on the roster, on any roster, because that is such valuable information for your own entity, your own, Charles DeGisco Incorporated, or whatever your LLC is, who you are. That advice from Jeremy is really, really powerful. But from an organization standpoint, it's easy to hate on Dana White, but right off the bat, there would be no MMA, just MMA in general right now, if it wasn't for Dana White, right? So he's built it, and now everybody's arrived. And now we just need to adjust the way things are done. A lot of people like to talk about Dana White's personal net worth. That really doesn't have anything to do with it. He got a big check when Endeavor bought, or WME IMG bought out the UFC for $4.2 billion. Good for him, because when he started it, it was like negative $40 million before the Ultimate Fighter finale between Forrest Griffin and Stephen Bonner. So that's like the quintessential American dream. He risked everything and he got it and he made it happen. And now he's rich. So that's a completely separate situation from the negotiation of what is the UFC paying the fighters. And this is where it gets a little bit convoluted, because that without knowing the numbers, how is it that some organizations can pay so high to certain fighters? And I'm not saying that it's good that they pay other fighters very little, but if you look at like Canelo, right? I mean, there's nobody in the UFC making Canelo money. I'll argue that you have multiple stars in the UFC, at least nationally, who are bigger than Canelo, or maybe not bigger, but at his level, right? Up at that level. Triple G got paid big by DAZN. When's the last time people have talked about him, right? So I say that as the baseline of people need to start separating Dana White's personal net worth from what the UFC as a company is paying these fighters, because those are two different things. And it's so easy to frame the argument that way, and then the discussion goes out the window. But if we keep it localized, what exactly is going on here? How much money is the UFC making? Why are the fighters getting paid so little? And how do we change that in general? And I could tell you that when I've sat down and I've talked to some very very popular fighters, I don't want to say names, but I've talked to people who you've watched on TV, and I've had the crazy opportunity to ask them these questions in a casual environment. And the answer is basically, we have no leverage, and what we get paid, what our money says that the athletic commissions release, is not the money that we're always getting paid. So there might be, for some people, not much incentive to get paid. I mean, that's a real question. I know a lot of journalists have the current thing. They're fighting really hard for this. And I think a lot of fighters have that. But I wonder how many fighters are actually just like, yeah, you guys can change it if you want. I'm not putting my neck out there because I'm happy, right? If at my company, everybody started clamoring for more pay, yeah, all right, yeah, I'd love more money. But I'm not going to risk what I have because I'm pretty happy with my current situation. So I think it's a complicated situation that's just made like, oh, so cut and dry. Like, he's rich, he's not, he should give him more money. I just don't know if that's it.
Well, I like how you put it, because what you're basically saying is we need reform. We don't need a fix. And I think there's a difference. We need to redesign how we're operating as an organization. But I think, and kind of like paralleling with is that a word, paralleling? If it's not, we're making it a word today. It draws a parallel to when I'm working with a lot of organizations. It's no different than when you're a 10-employee company. You have different needs and infrastructure than when you're a 110-employee company. You need different things to support the business because it has different requirements and there's more moving parts. The UFC has become something that 5 people in the world at some point thought it could become, and now here it is. And it sounds like they just haven't updated the business to what it is today, where at one point it was -40, then it became valued, then it got bought, and now it's this prime time massive entity that just hasn't done an overhaul on their infrastructure. And it's not about hiring a consultant. It's just about understanding, look, everything you wanted to have happen. But now we need to update the infrastructure and figure out how we're taking care of the people. And instead of having a quick fix and a cost suppressant, it's, guys, we need to figure out how healthy the patient is, right? We need to figure out what's really, really going on here. And I didn't know that. And it makes a lot of sense. Like, UFC came into my frame. It's something I've been really interested in the last few years, but it makes perfect sense. They just, it's hard, man.
I'm losing audio.
Hey, Jeremy, you cut out there for just a minute, bro. Just right after you made that motion, you cut off.
Can you hear me now?
I have to wind down, and so please restate what you were saying with the midair. We need that last statement, and then I'm going to have to pull it. I have 2 quick questions to ask you guys, and I have many more, but I have to go around 12:30. So, please state your thoughts.
Can you hear me now?
Yeah.
Okay, I think my headphones just died. Was just saying that there comes a point in every successful organization that when you get to the peak that you've been working for and you finally realize what it was when you're like, it could be this thing, you have to step back and say, we're a new entity, we're a new organism, right? Like a toddler needs different nutrients like love and attention than a 25-year-old grown man. We as humans evolve into different beings that need different things to get to the next level and to take care of ourselves, right? Organizations are the same way. There's a reason why there's gerontologists. They only help people that are older in life. There's a reason why there's pediatrics that help kids, right? Organizations have the same development. And I think they're just at a pivotal point where they've hit the scale and now they need to take a step back and realize, okay, what do we need to do now?
Exactly. You know what? I'm going to end on that because I think that wraps it all up. Thank you guys so much. I have more questions, so I hope we can do this again, especially
Definitely.
Charles, I kind of love to touch base with you as we get to stage 2, 3 and see how things are going. And also when, if Cowboy Series, when they come back, Jeremy, I'm fascinated. You gave us some nuggets of information. And I love that you're kind of curating some knowledge right now. And I appreciate that from like life coaches to, I think you had a broadcaster on there and I find that fascinating. So please keep that up along with your job with described. I'm not going to describe it, but it's really connecting.
Of course.
Bigger picture, all of that. Where can we find you, Jeremy? If we wanted to.
Yeah, I would say everything's centralized through firstfloorconversations.com, 1ST, firstfloorconversations.com. Everything is centralized there. If you just want to connect, LinkedIn is the right place. Jeremy Francesi, look me up by name, say hello. I love meeting new people. The podcast is designed not to I don't monetize it. I turn down ad spend. The purpose is to build conversations that have entertainment value, but can be distilled into something actionable. So you listen to it. And if it's a health and wellness advisor, you can apply something to make yourself healthier. If it's fighting, you can apply something that makes your mentality shift in a way that's congruent with whatever it is that we're talking about. It's just, I want to learn. I'm curious. And for me, it's an hour to plug in a week. And so firstfloorconversations.com is where you can find me. But thank you, Nancy, for having me on. And this has been a blast. I hope we can do this again.
Definitely. Thank you so much. Charles, where can people find you?
Pretty simple, guys. Feel free to reach out to me on LinkedIn, Charles DeGisco, or Instagram, CGDIGISCO, CG DeGisco. Twitter, I think I'm going to take some time away from because it's tough to be around all the negativity, but I'm more than happy to talk with everybody. And if anybody has any tips on running a business or has any questions, conversely, on running a business, I would love to, especially in a gym, I'd love to hear from you guys. And just Nancy, thank you so much for the opportunity. Jeremy, my man, always a pleasure speaking with you. You always give me some quote to work off of that changes my mindset.
Excellent. And it was the virtual, if you said that anyone can go to your website for
so there is some stuff on our website, districtmartialarts.com. Feel free to go there, check it out. The classes themselves are really for the members. But if you're a member and you're not paying, that's fine. As long as you're a member, we'll be able to provide that for you. So feel free to sign up and come take some virtual classes as we work our way through here on planning how to open.
Great. No, thank you guys so much. I'm Nancy Kidder at American University. I find out it too if we're going to be hybrid, remote, who knows? There have been lots of ideas thrown around, but you can always find my stuff at writeandfight.com and at Nancy Ann Kidder on Twitter and Instagram. Thanks, you guys. Have a great day. I really appreciate this. Was a really engaging conversation that's also giving me lots to chew on. So thank you.
Thank you so much.
All right. Bye.
Bye.